still want somebody to draw me pictures and speak slowly when they describe how you are going to invest $2 billion into a stadium that the public's going to own.
Let's ask Robert Mays this question. As one of our favorite guys to talk to from The Athletic, he does a great football podcast. We've talked to him a couple of different times here leading up to this draft week. All right, Mays, they're sort of comparable as we bring them in on the CarX Tire and Auto hotline. Whether you're the day before the draft unveiling shiny renderings of a football stadium or you're handing a jersey to the #1 overall pick, what are you more optimistic about executing correctly, the quarterback or the stadium plans?
I've never seen them screw up a stadium plan. Well, maybe that's not true.
Well, we did here. We screwed it up here, Mace.
Screw up fewer stadium plans. So I'm going to go with more optimism for the stadium.
Wow.
That's not to say anything about Caleb Williams. Actually, I'm fairly optimistic about that, but I've just got a lot of scar tissue that's currently lingering. I think you guys can understand that.
I'm a little taken aback. I'm not going to lie.
I did not expect him to answer this. I thought for sure he was going to say Caleb.
I mean, they turned Old Soldier Field into a space shuttle. Then they spent $179 million to purchase land in Arlington Heights, and then said, "Nope, we're going downtown." And then they talked about putting the road under the ground, and my head just exploded. I thought you were going to say Caleb Williams is going to be the best Bears quarterback we've ever seen. They're going to throw for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdown passes.
I actually do think that's probably going to happen. I do think he's going to be the best quarterback that we've ever seen. Whew. But I think it's hard to ignore everything that's happened to me over the 36 years that I've been on this planet.
Yeah, I was surprised. I should poll that question. See what I bet you Bears fans will say the quarterback.
Yeah,
but we'll see. Maybe they go with Mace.
I am interested to know what your expectations are, Robert, about the rookie campaign of Caleb Williams in a system that has been, dolled up pretty nicely for him. I don't know that a first overall pick has found himself in a better infrastructure in his rookie season than the one Caleb will find himself in.
Oh, I think that they've set him up for success just about as well as you could hope. And obviously we'll see what happens at 9. But if you look at all the rookie quarterback seasons we've had recently, guys that have been capable starters from day one, I wouldn't be surprised if he did something like that. Maybe a diet version of the Justin Herbert rookie year that we saw, what we saw from CJ Stroud last year. Just one of those seasons where you come away being like, yep, he's good enough. He clears the bar. I think that would be a success, and I think that they have absolutely set him up for something like that.
Well, so as we've gone down this road, Robert, is there any concerns that you had, whether it was before you watched all the tape, before you saw some of the interviews? Have all your questions been answered about Caleb Williams, or is that impossible until you actually see him play in a Bears uniform?
Oh, I think that's impossible. I think there absolutely are still questions. And my biggest question is just, how does he see things and how adept is he going to be at playing on time and within structure? If you watch him play, there's so many moments where he'll just turn stuff down, within the structure of the play. And often he's right. He'll be looking for a bigger play. He'll understand what the limitations of that choice are. There's one play against Oregon that really sticks out to me where the third down, like 3rd and 8. Oregon brings a blitz off the nickel. He sees the nickel blitzing. He chooses not to throw hot to that guy, in part because I think he knows he's short of the sticks anyway. So he extends the play and then ends up throwing the ball to the original hot receiver coming all the way across the field, and it's like a 15-yard gain for a first down. And you see that kind of stuff. And I think the biggest question with him is, did he choose to operate outside of the structure of the offense because he had concerns about the supporting cast, concerns about the structure of the offense, or did he choose to operate outside of that structure because he doesn't know how to live within it? And until we see how he plays with better players around him, with a more defined offensive system around him, I think it's impossible to answer that question.
Robert, did you see a definitive difference between how he played the quarterback position in 2022 versus 2023?
I think so. I think he was more willing to hold on to the ball in 2023. I think that there was just less separation, period. I mean, the difference in that offense with Jordan Addison and without Jordan Addison, I think, was pretty pronounced. And you can go back to that Oregon game as a really good example. Oregon played a lot of press man coverage against them in that game because they just didn't trust that anybody could create separation and get open among any of those receivers. And that is one thing that a lot of these guys, Jay Daniels being a really good example, he's going to get a worse situation. Well, Caleb Williams absolutely is going to be in a better situation in the NFL than he was during his final year at USC. And I think that's what's so encouraging about this.
Okay, so they've already put a pretty good group together to help with his development. What else do you expect them to do at 9 that possibly could help him, or maybe they're looking in a different direction?
If one of those receivers is there at 9, I would support drafting one of the receivers at 9 because Keenan Allen is 32. He's not under contract for next year. And you're only going to be in 11 personnel 65% of the time. You play with 3 receivers. They really don't have a functional third receiver right now. Tyler Scott was fine as a rookie, but nothing that you saw from him should preclude you from taking an Odunze or a Neighbors if they're available to you. So I think both in terms of the short term and the long term, if one of those guys is there, I would have no issue with drafting him.
Or do you prefer one over the other, Odunze over Neighbors?
I just like Odunze because I just like how clean he is. I like how many different things he can do. He's just such a solid prospect. Yeah. I understand why people have painted Neighbors as more of a high upside type of proposition just because of what he can do with the ball in his hands, how explosive he is. But with the other 2 guys that they have, I just love the stylistic fit that Odunze gives you. DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Keenan Allen is a lights out group of receivers. But if it's Malik Neighbors, or if they think, hey, we can make a play for Marvin Harrison because the draft fell a certain way, either of these 3 guys, I think that you'd be happier with the results.
When you mentioned Harrison, do you have, is there any scenario where you would be in favor of trading up for him?
The only reason I would be in favor of trading up for him is I wouldn't characterize it as trading up for him. I would characterize it as you're trading up because you don't think any of the 3 are going to be there at 9. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. If 2 of them go earlier, if there's a team that thinks they want to get to 8 and jump the Bears for the 3rd one. So if you think that you have to maneuver a little bit in the top 10 in order to get one of the 3 receivers and maybe use that 20-25 second that you have from Carolina and some of that ammunition, I could understand that thought process. Going back to the combine, there are people who are draft experts and look at this all the time that thought that was going to be necessary, that they would have to move up to get one of these 3 guys. And with all the quarterbacks potentially going in the top 5, that calculus has changed a little bit. But if that's where they sit, even after all of the dust settles, we have to do something, or one of these 3 guys isn't going to be there at 9. I don't have an issue with that.
So you don't. So giving up one of the 2nd round picks is not too much to end up with one of the 3 wide receivers.
I could see it both ways. You've spent a lot of draft capital recently on veterans. You traded away a 2nd for Montez Sweat. You traded away a 4th for Keenan Allen. You don't have a ton of cost control talent that you're going to be adding to the roster this year because one of the picks is going to be for a quarterback who's going to be the number 1 pick who's sort of expensive. So you could look at the way that they've spent draft capital over the last 2 years and say, I would like a few more cheap dice rolls as we've spent on some expensive veterans. But I also think that you only have so many shots to add difference-making players at that position, and you want to put your quarterback in the best position to succeed as early as you can. So I understand each argument, but I don't think I'd have a strong issue either way.
If the draft goes the following route, Robert, like there's a run on quarterbacks, they're drafted 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then the Bears are basically picking 5th in this draft with, regard to the other players. If the 3 receivers are gone and Joe Alt is gone, do you believe the Bears will stay there and draft a pass rusher? Or do you believe that they would take that opportunity to maybe move back and increase what they have in terms of collateral or draft currency?
It's a great question, and I think it's about how they see the pass rushers. And from what I understand, there are teams who see them clustered. It's a preference sort of thing. Dallas Turner's 21. He's 2 years younger than the other 2 guys who are, I think, have been described as first-round picks, Jared Verse and Latu from UCLA. So if you think the guy who is an athletic freak, who is only 21 years old and does have pass rush production, there's some of these guys who come into the draft. I think that Trayvon Walker being the best example when he went number 1, he had almost no pass rush production in college. Dallas Turner still has a ways to go in terms of nuance and refinement, but this is a guy who still was one of the most productive pass rushers in college football last year. The difference is Latu was probably the most productive pass rusher. So it's about the flavor that you want. What type of player? There are pluses and minuses to all of them. So let's say you like all 3. you're comfortable, let's say if you go from 9 to, 13, right? Because the Raiders want to come up and make sure that they get the top corner in the draft, just as a hypothetical. If you like all three of them, I think you feel safe doing that. But if you have them tiered a specific way where you have one guy that's clearly ahead of the others, I would have no issue with sticking in the top 10 and picking one.
Robert Mays joining us. It's Waddle and Silvy on ESPN 1000. Catch Mays' football show. It's called The Athletic Football Show. And he joins us right now on ESPN 1000. The offensive tackle position is debated a lot with a lot of Bears fans, because I know a lot of fans would like them to draft a left tackle with that first-round pick, or if they do trade down to grab the left tackle there. Others say Braxton Jones is good enough. How do you grade him, and how do you think they feel about him?
It's a great question. I think that he probably does clear that bar of good enough. I was talking to another GM about this last week, just about their needs and how they might fill it. And he said, don't think about it as to whether Braxton Jones is good enough. Think about whether they'd be willing to pay him $20 million a year next offseason. That's more of the question, is that is he right now? You can absolutely live with him, but is he somebody you're going to want to commit to 2 years from now? Or do you want to use this chance to upgrade and get in front of that a little bit? I thought that was interesting. But as I look at their needs, I think that left tackle is a little bit further down the list. If you're going to draft a left tackle at that spot, I think you've made a declaration about how you want to build the roster and where you want strength of the roster to be. That feels out of character compared to what they've done recently. The fact that they were even willing to roll with Braxton Jones as a rookie, I think lets me know we want to just make sure that we have enough pieces up front to get by on the offensive line. We don't necessarily need to spend high-end draft capital. I think Darnell Wright was the best player and best option available to them at that spot last year. So we'll see what happens. But I'm of the opinion, I'm in the camp, that I think he's good enough for you to continue rolling with what you have.
This draft has the capacity to be pretty sexy, pretty interesting to see how things unfold. What do you expect to happen early on? Do you expect there to be a run of quarterbacks 1 through 4?
I do. Yeah, I think there are enough teams that need the fourth quarterback. And I think that Arizona specifically has shown a willingness to move around the board. If this was a team that had a history of sticking and picking, that wasn't creative in the way that they saw the draft, maybe I would think differently. But what we saw from Arizona last year, where they were willing to move out of the top 10 for their guy, I think Monty Austin-Ford is creative in how he sees this. And I think that it's all about the market. It's all about which teams are motivated to make something happen, and Minnesota absolutely is. I mean, Minnesota needs to come away from this draft with a quarterback, and I think a team like the Broncos is. They don't have as much draft capital as Minnesota does, but I think they do have an urgency to come away with a quarterback. And if it's two teams that can create that bidding war, then I think that it leaves a team like Arizona more willing to move off of it because they're going to get the right price for that pick.
Is J.J. McCarthy the hardest evaluation of any player in this draft for you?
It's a good question. I think he's probably in that conversation, but there are a lot of guys that I think are difficult. Marius Mims started 8 games for Georgia last year, and he is somebody that's probably going to go in the first round. So I think that makes it tough. Quinyon Mitchell was a MAC player. He did well at the Senior Bowl, but when you're comparing him to other MAC players, it can be a little bit difficult to slot those guys and figure out exactly where they should go. But I think J.J. McCarthy is probably in that camp just because you got to watch a lot of games in order to get the right sample size for what he is as a passer.
Which of these quarterbacks do you think has the biggest bust potential in him? And that's not just the player, but where he finds himself drafted as well.
It's a good question.
Very breathy there. That was a big breath by you.
Well, I'm trying to. So it's not. I wouldn't stack them this way. If I had the second overall pick in this draft, I would pick Drake May, just because I think he has a higher upside like Jaden Daniels does. And sometimes when we're talking about quarterbacks, I think that we can miscast what upside and ceiling looks like. Justin Fields is a very good example of this. People look at somebody with physical tools and think that they have a high upside. But if you look at the quarterbacks around the NFL who truly do have really high upside, it's about creativity and potential as a passer from the pocket. What sort of physical gifts do you have to navigate the pocket, change arm slots, throw off platform, throw a little bit on the move? And I think that Jaden Daniels, even though he's a great athlete, you didn't see a lot of that in college. He was not a creative player. If he was pressured or he had to move off his spot, he ran almost every single time. There are very few examples of him moving off of his spot and being a creative thrower. He's a great athlete, but there isn't a lot of creative flourish to his game. I feel the opposite about Drake May. You saw a lot of that with Drake May, of him navigating the pocket, making throws off balance, making throws off platform. He is a really creative player. So I think he's the bet that I would make, but I also think you could make an argument that Jaden Daniels, because of the rushing and because of the accuracy and some of the decision-making, is actually a safer pick than somebody like Drake May would be.
It's great stuff, Mays. We always appreciate you. Enjoy the draft, and we will catch up, okay?
Thanks, Robert.
Sounds good, guys. Talk to you soon.